Beyond the wall, where the ancient stones of Winterfell seem like a distant dream, and the warmth of hearth fires becomes nothing more than memory, there exists a love story that bloomed in the harshest of winters. Tonight, we journey to a place where honor meets wildness, where duty confronts desire, and where two souls found each other against all odds in the frozen heart of the North. Let your breathing slow as we step into this tale, a story meant to carry you gently into sleep while your mind wanders through snow-covered valleys and candlelit caves. This is the story of Jon Snow and Ygritte, told not with the clash of swords or the weight of destiny, but with the quiet intimacy of two people discovering love in a world that seemed determined to keep them apart. Close your eyes and let the cold wind of the North fade away as we begin where all the best stories do, with a moment that changes everything. Picture, if you will, the rolling hills beyond the wall, painted white with fresh snow under a sky so clear it seems to hold 1,000 secrets. The air tastes of pine and possibility, and somewhere in this vast wilderness, a bastard of Winterfell is about to meet a wildling girl whose laughter could melt the hardest ice. Jon Snow had always believed he understood cold. Growing up at Winterfell, he thought the bite of northern winters had prepared him for anything the world might offer. But beyond the wall, cold became something else entirely. It wasn't just weather anymore. It was a living thing that crept through leather and wool, that turned breath into crystal clouds, that made every step a negotiation with the frozen earth beneath his feet. He had been walking for hours through the endless white, his black cloak a dark smudge against the pristine snow. The mission that brought him here seemed simple enough in the telling. Infiltrate the wildling camps, learn their plans, report back to the Night's Watch. Simple words that had led him into this maze of ice and stone, where every shadow might hide danger and every sound might herald death. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the snowfields in shades of gold, in rose that would have been beautiful if not for the bone-deep exhaustion that made each breath feel like work. Jon's stomach had been empty for too long, and his water skin held only slush that tasted of leather in desperation. He was beginning to understand why the free folk called this land home. It demanded everything from those who dared to live here, but it also offered a kind of freedom that existed nowhere else in the Seven Kingdoms. That was when he heard it. Laughter, bright and clear as the ring of steel on steel, echoing off the rocky outcroppings that rose from the snow like ancient sentinels. Jon froze, hand moving instinctively to the hilt of his sword. But something about that sound made him pause. It wasn't the harsh bark of soldiers or the cruel mirth of raiders. This was pure joy, untainted by malice or fear. Following the sound meant abandoning the careful path he had been tracking, meant moving toward unknown danger instead of away from it. But Jon found his feet carrying him forward anyway, drawn by something he couldn't quite name. Perhaps it was simple curiosity, or perhaps it was the loneliness that had been his constant companion since leaving the wall behind. The laughter grew louder as he crested a small ridge, and suddenly the source revealed itself. Below him, in a sheltered hollow where the wind couldn't reach, a figure moved through the snow with impossible grace. Red hair caught the dying light like flame, and Jon realized he was watching someone dance alone in the wilderness, spinning and leaping with a freedom that seemed to mock the harsh landscape around her. Ygritte moved like the wind itself had taken human form. Her feet barely seemed to touch the ground as she spun, arms outstretched to embrace the vast sky above. She wore furs and leather-like armor, but they couldn't hide the vitality that radiated from her every movement. This was someone who belonged here, who had been shaped by this unforgiving land into something fierce and beautiful and utterly alive. Jon should have retreated then, should have marked the location and reported back to his brothers about wildling activity in the area. That would have been the smart thing, the safe thing, the thing that honor demanded. Instead, he found himself captivated by the sight before him, by this glimpse of joy in a place where joy seemed impossible. She stopped dancing as suddenly as she had begun, head tilting as if she sensed his presence. When she turned toward his hiding place, Jon felt his breath catch in his throat. Her eyes were gray as winter storms, and they seemed to look right through him, past all his careful training and noble intentions, straight to something he hadn't even known existed inside himself. "Are you planning to stand there, gawping all day, Crow?" Her voice carried easily across the snow, accented with the musical lilt of the free folk, but edged with something that might have been amusement. "Or are you going to come down here and explain why you're watching a girl dance?" Heat flooded Jon's face despite the cold. He had been discovered, his careful stealth undone by eyes sharper than any hawk's. For a moment, he considered running, disappearing back into the white expanse before this encounter could complicate his mission further. But something in her tone, challenging rather than threatening, made him step forward instead. "I meant no offense," he called back, making his way carefully down the slope. Snow crunched under his boots, each step bringing him closer to a conversation that felt somehow inevitable. "I heard laughter and thought someone might need help." She watched him approach with undisguised curiosity, head cocked to one side like a bird studying something particularly interesting. "Help?" The word seemed to amuse her. "What kind of help did you think someone might need in the middle of nowhere, dressed in black and carrying enough steel to outfit a small army?" Jon realized how he must look to her. The black of the Night's Watch marked him as clearly as a banner, and his sword and dagger proclaimed him a warrior, even to casual observation. No wonder she seemed more curious than afraid. Anyone who danced alone in the wilderness was unlikely to be intimidated by a single armed man, no matter how grim he tried to appear. "I thought perhaps you were lost," he said, feeling foolish even as the words left his mouth. Everything about her, from her confident stance to the way she wore her furs like a second skin, proclaimed that she was exactly where she belonged. "Lost?" Ygritte laughed again, and the sound made something flutter in Jon's chest that he didn't quite recognize. "You're the one who's lost, Jon Snow, lost and far from home and walking in circles for the better part of the day." The use of his name stopped him cold. "How do you know who I am?" "Word travels fast beyond the wall. A bastard of Winterfell joins the Night's Watch, then disappears into wildling territory with grand plans of playing the spy." Her gray eyes sparkled with mischief. "Did you think we wouldn't notice? Did you think we wouldn't be watching?" Jon's hand moved to his sword hilt again, but she made no threatening gesture in return. If anything, she seemed to find his caution entertaining. "If you know who I am, then you know why I'm here." "Do I?" She took a step closer, and Jon caught the scent of pine needles and wood smoke that clung to her hair. "You're here because some old men in black told you to be here. But why are you really here, Jon Snow? What are you running from that's worse than the cold and the hunger and the endless white?" The question hit him like a physical blow, cutting through all his carefully constructed reasons and justifications to something raw and true underneath. He was running, had been running since the day he left Winterfell, since the moment he chose the wall over a life of quiet obscurity as a bastard son. "I'm not running from anything," he said, but the words sounded hollow, even to his own ears. Ygritte smiled then, and it transformed her entire face. Gone was the wild creature who had challenged him across the snow. In her place stood a girl who seemed to see right through all his defenses to the uncertainty beneath. "Everyone's running from something, Crow. The only difference is whether you admit it or not." She turned away from him then, beginning to gather up the few belongings she had scattered around her makeshift camp. A bow strung with sinew, a quiver of arrows fletched with white feathers, a pack that looked like it had seen 1,000 miles of hard travel. Everything spoke of a life lived in motion, of someone who carried home with her wherever she went. "Where are you going?" The question escaped before Jon could stop it, and she glanced back at him with raised eyebrows. "Why? Planning to follow me?" There was challenge in her voice again, but underneath it, something that might have been invitation. Jon found himself at a crossroads that hadn't existed 5 minutes before. Behind him lay the path back to the wall, to duty and honor, and the cold comfort of belonging somewhere, even if that somewhere was among men who had sworn away their futures. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and a red-haired wildling girl who seemed to carry sunlight with her even in the depths of winter. "Maybe I am," he heard himself say, and wondered when he had become someone who could surprise himself. Ygritte studied his face for a long moment, as if weighing something important in the balance. "It's going to be a cold night, and you look like you haven't eaten in days. My fire's warm, and my rabbit stew won't poison you." She paused, then added with a grin that was equal parts mischief and dare, "Assuming you can keep up with a wildling girl, that is." The challenge was unmistakable, and Jon found himself smiling in return, despite everything that should have made this moment impossible. "I think I can manage that." As darkness began to settle over the frozen landscape like a soft blanket, Ygritte led Jon to a sheltered grove, where ancient pines stood guard against the wind. Their branches, heavy with snow, created a natural cathedral, and in the center of this quiet sanctuary, she had built a fire that crackled and danced with welcome warmth. The flames painted everything in shades of amber and gold, transforming the harsh wilderness into something almost magical. Jon watched as she moved around the small camp with practiced efficiency, stirring something in a blackened pot that hung over the fire on a tripod of sturdy branches. The aroma that rose from whatever she was cooking made his empty stomach clench with sudden, desperate hunger. When had he last eaten something that hadn't been dried meat or stale bread? When had he last sat by a fire that felt like home instead of mere survival? "Sit," she commanded, gesturing to a fallen log she had positioned near the flames. "You look ready to fall over, and I won't have you collapsing into my supper." He lowered himself gratefully onto the makeshift seat, feeling warmth seep into his bones for the first time in days. This close to the fire, he could see her more clearly. Her hair wasn't just red, but a dozen shades of copper and flame, braided with small bones and colored beads that caught the firelight. Her face was strong rather than delicate, marked by sun and wind, and laughter lines that spoke of someone who found joy even in hardship. "You really did know I was coming," Jon said, noticing how perfectly the camp was arranged, how the fire had clearly been burning for longer than the few minutes since she had discovered him watching her dance. "Course I did. Ygritte ladled something that smelled like heaven into a wooden bowl and handed it to him. "You've been stumbling around out there like a drunk bear for hours. Amazing you didn't walk off a cliff or into a snowdrift." The stew was rabbit, as promised, rich with herbs he couldn't identify, and vegetables that must have been precious beyond measure this far from any settlement. Each spoonful seemed to spread warmth through his entire body, and he had to force himself to eat slowly instead of devouring the entire bowl in desperate gulps. "Why help me?" he asked between careful bites. "You know why I'm here. You know what I represent." Ygritte settled onto another log across the fire from him, her own bowl balanced on her knees. "Maybe I'm curious about crows. Maybe I've never seen one up close before." Her gray eyes reflected the flames as she studied his face. "Or maybe I just like the look of you, Jon Snow." The simple honesty of her words hit him harder than any sword blow. In the world he came from, words were weapons, carefully chosen and strategically deployed. People spoke in layers of meaning, hiding their true thoughts behind courtesy and custom. But Ygritte said exactly what she meant, without armor or artifice, and it left him feeling strangely defenseless. "I like the look of you too," he admitted, then felt heat flood his face at his own boldness. Her laughter was like music in the quiet grove. "Good. Would be awkward sharing a fire with someone who made my skin crawl." She took another spoonful of stew, then added more seriously, "Though I suppose you should know that helping you probably makes me a traitor to my own people, just like being here makes you a traitor to yours." The weight of truth in her words settled over them both like snow. Here they sat, a sworn brother of the Night's Watch and a free folk warrior, sharing food and fire in defiance of everything their peoples had taught them about each other. It should have felt wrong, dangerous, foolish. Instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "Are you?" Jon asked quietly. "A traitor, I mean. Depends how you look at it." Ygritte stared into the fire, her expression thoughtful. "My people would say I should put an arrow through your heart and leave you for the wolves. Your people would say you should drag me back to the wall in chains." She looked up at him then, eyes bright, with something that might have been mischief or might have been something deeper. "But I don't think either of us much cares what our people would say right now." She was right, and that realization should have terrified him. Everything he had been taught, everything he had sworn, everything he believed about duty and honor demanded that he see her as an enemy. But sitting here in the dancing firelight, watching the way her face lit up when she smiled, all he could see was a girl who had chosen kindness over suspicion, warmth over safety. "Tell me about your home," Jon said, surprising himself with the request. "What's it like, living free beyond the wall?" Ygritte's face softened at the question, and for a moment, she looked younger, almost dreamy. "It's hard," she said simply. "Harder than you soft Southerners could imagine. Every day is a fight just to keep breathing, keep moving, keep your people alive another night." She paused, gathering her thoughts, like someone choosing the right words to paint a picture. "But it's honest. No lords telling you what to think, no kings demanding your sons for their wars. When you wake up in the morning, every choice you make is yours." "Doesn't sound so terrible," Jon murmured, thinking of all the expectations that had shaped his life, all the rules that had hemmed him in since the day he was born a bastard in his father's house. "No," she agreed, studying his face in the firelight. "Though I suppose even freedom gets lonely sometimes." The admission hung in the air between them, fragile as spider silk. Jon thought about his own loneliness, the way it had followed him from Winterfell to the Wall and beyond. Not just the loneliness of being bastard-born, but something deeper. The loneliness of never quite fitting anywhere, of always being slightly apart from whatever group claimed him. "Is that why you were dancing?" he asked. "Because you were lonely." Ygritte smiled, but there was something wistful in it now. "I was dancing because I was happy. First time in weeks, I had a moment to myself. No clan business to worry about, no responsibilities weighing me down. Just me, and the snow, in the sky." She tilted her head, considering. "Though I suppose I was lonely too. Happy and lonely at the same time. Does that make sense?" It made perfect sense. More sense than anything had in a long time. "Yes," he said softly. "It does." They finished their meal in comfortable silence, the kind of quiet that felt full rather than empty. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks dancing up toward the star-filled sky. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, the sound lonely and wild and beautiful. Ygritte pulled a skin of something that wasn't water from her pack and offered it to him. "What is it?" Jon asked, accepting the container. "Fermented mare's milk. My people call it firewater, though it won't burn like proper spirits." She grinned at his expression. "Don't look so worried, Crow. It won't kill you." The liquid was strange, slightly sour, but with a warmth that spread through his chest and made his tired muscles relax. He handed it back to her, watching as she took a long drink, without any of the hesitation he had shown. "Your turn," she said, settling back against her log, like someone preparing for a good story. "Tell me about growing up in a castle. What's it like, having servants and feather beds and more food than you can eat?" Jon considered how to answer that, how to explain the strange contradictions of his childhood. "It's not what you might think," he said finally. "Yes, there was always food, always warmth, always safety. But there were rules too. So many rules about how to act, how to speak, who you could talk to, and who you couldn't. And everyone always knew exactly who you were supposed to be, even when you weren't sure yourself." "Sounds like a different kind of prison," Ygritte observed. And Jon was struck by how quickly she understood. Sometimes it felt that way, especially being a bastard. You're part of the family, but not really part of it. You have a place, but not the right place. You belong, but you don't belong. He stared into the fire, remembering. "I used to watch my half-brother Rob and wonder what it would feel like to be so certain of your place in the world. And now I wonder if certainty is overrated." The words surprised him as he spoke them. Maybe not knowing exactly where you fit means you get to choose for yourself. Ygritte smiled, and there was approval in it that warmed him more than the fire or the fermented milk. "See, you're learning already. Freedom's not about having everything decided for you. It's about making your own decisions, even when they're hard ones." The night was growing deeper around them, and Jon realized he should be thinking about keeping watch, about the dangers that might lurk in the darkness beyond their small circle of light. But he couldn't bring himself to care about any of that. For the first time since leaving Winterfell, he felt truly at peace, truly present in the moment, instead of always thinking 3 steps ahead. "Ygritte," he said, testing her name on his tongue, like a new word in a foreign language. "Yes, Jon Snow." She leaned forward slightly, firelight playing across her features. "Thank you for the food, the fire, the company. You didn't have to help me." "No," she agreed. "I didn't." She was quiet for a moment, then added softly, "But I wanted to." Sometimes wanting something is reason enough. The admission settled between them like falling snow, gentle but transformative. Jon found himself studying her face in the shifting firelight, memorizing the way shadows played across her cheekbones, the way her eyes seemed to hold secrets older than the wall itself. He had never met anyone who spoke so plainly about desire, about wanting something simply because the heart demanded it. "I should tell you something," Ygritte said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "about why I was really waiting for you out here." Jon's pulse quickened. Though whether from anticipation or alarm, he couldn't say. "What do you mean?" She stood and moved around the fire, settling beside him on the fallen log with a casual grace that made his breath catch. This close, he could see the small scar that cut through her left eyebrow, could smell the pine and wood smoke that seemed to be her natural perfume. "My people, they've been watching the crows for weeks now, counting your numbers, learning your patterns." She paused, meeting his eyes directly. "They know about your mission, Jon Snow. They know you're not really one of us." The words should have sent him reaching for his sword, should have shattered the strange peace that had settled over the grove. Instead, Jon found himself oddly calm, as if some part of him had been waiting for this revelation. "Then why am I still breathing?" "Because I asked them to let me handle you." Ygritte's smile was soft, almost shy, so different from her earlier boldness. "I told them. I wanted to see what kind of man the bastard of Winterfell really was." "And what did you decide?" She reached out then, her fingers tracing the edge of his cloak where the snow had melted and frozen again into tiny crystals. "I decided that maybe some crows are worth saving." The touch was light, barely there, but it sent warmth racing through Jon's entire body. He had never been touched like that before, with such casual intimacy, as if she had every right to map the boundaries of his personal space. In the world he came from, such contact would have required negotiations, permissions, formal arrangements. Here in the firelight, it felt as natural as breathing. "The others won't be happy when they learn you didn't capture me," Jon said, though his voice came out rougher than intended. "Let me worry about the others." Ygritte's hand moved to rest against his chest, directly over his heart. "Right now, there's just you and me in this fire. Everything else can wait until tomorrow." Tomorrow. The word carried weight, implications that neither of them were quite ready to examine. Tomorrow meant returning to the world of duty and obligation, of sides that had been chosen long before either of them was born. Tomorrow meant remembering why a bastard crow and a wildling girl were supposed to be enemies. "What happens tomorrow?" Jon asked, though part of him dreaded the answer. "Tomorrow, you decide what matters more to you. The vows you swore to men who sent you here to die, or the choice you could make to live." Ygritte's gray eyes never left his face. "Tomorrow, you decide if you're brave enough to be free." The challenge in her words was unmistakable, but underneath it lay something that might have been hope. Jon realized she was offering him something he had never imagined possible. Not just escape from his mission, but escape from the entire life that had been mapped out for him since birth. The Night's Watch, the Wall, the endless cycle of duty and sacrifice that stretched ahead of him like an unbroken chain. "And if I choose freedom?" he asked quietly. "What then?" "Then you learn what it means to truly live." Ygritte's voice carried the promise of adventures yet to come, of mornings that belonged entirely to them, of nights spent around fires like this one, with no one to answer to but each other. You learn what it feels like to make choices, because you want to, not because someone else decided you should. Jon thought about his brothers at the wall, men who had sworn away their futures for the greater good. He thought about his father, who had built his entire life around honor and duty. He thought about the person he had always believed himself to be, defined by obligations and expectations that had never quite fit him properly. "I don't know how to be free," he admitted, the words feeling strange on his tongue. Ygritte's smile was radiant, transforming her entire face. "Nobody does at first. That's what makes it an adventure." She leaned closer then, close enough that he could feel her breath against his skin, could see the way the firelight turned her hair to living flame. "Can I tell you a secret, Jon Snow?" He nodded, not trusting his voice to work properly. "I've been dreaming about you for weeks, ever since word came that a bastard crow was wandering our lands, trying to play spy." Her fingers traced patterns against his chest, and Jon wondered if she could feel how fast his heart was beating. "In my dreams, you weren't wearing black. You were dressed in furs, in leather, and you were laughing, really laughing, like you'd forgotten how to be sad." The image she painted was so vivid, so impossible, and yet so appealing that Jon felt something crack open inside his chest. He tried to imagine himself as she described, free from the weight of his name and his vows, able to laugh without wondering if it was appropriate or allowed. "What else happened in these dreams?" he asked, surprised by his own boldness. Ygritte's cheeks colored slightly, but her gaze remained steady. "We were dancing together in the snow, just like I was dancing when you found me, except you were there too. We were spinning and laughing, and the whole world was ours." She paused, then added more softly, "And when we stopped dancing, you kissed me like you meant it." The confession hung in the air between them, fragile and precious as spun glass. Jon felt as if he was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down into depths that could either destroy him or teach him to fly. Everything rational told him to step back, to remember his duty, to honor the vows that had brought him to this frozen wilderness. Instead, he reached up and touched her face, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw with wonder. Her skin was warm despite the cold, soft despite the harsh life she led. She leaned into the touch like a cat seeking affection, her eyes fluttering closed for a moment before opening to meet his gaze again. "Ygritte," he whispered, her name a prayer and a promise and a question all at once. "Yes, Jon Snow, I think I'd like to learn how to dance." Her laughter was pure joy, bright enough to rival the stars themselves. "I think I'd like to teach you." She stood then, extending her hand to him with a grace that made his heart stutter. The fire crackled behind them, casting dancing shadows against the snow-laden pines, creating a ballroom more beautiful than any castle hall. Jon took her hand, allowing her to pull him to his feet, and for a moment, they simply stood there, fingers intertwined, looking at each other as if seeing something miraculous. "There's no music," Jon pointed out, though he made no move to let go of her hand. "There's always music if you know how to listen." Ygritte tilted her head, as if hearing something he couldn't. The wind in the trees, the crack of the fire, the sound of snow falling on snow. The whole world is singing, Jon Snow. You just have to learn the song. She began to move then, slowly at first, swaying in place to a rhythm only she could hear. Jon felt awkward, uncertain, all too aware of his heavy boots and the sword at his side. But Ygritte's smile was patient, encouraging, and gradually he began to follow her lead. They moved together in the small clearing, their feet finding purchase on the snow-packed ground, their bodies learning the language of shared motion. Jon had been trained in the formal dances of the nobility, precise steps choreographed for great halls and watching eyes. This was something entirely different, wild and spontaneous and absolutely free. "Feel that?" Ygritte asked as they spun together, her red hair flying out behind her like a banner. "That's what freedom feels like. No rules, no judges, just you and the moment and whatever your heart tells you to do." Jon did feel it, a lightness in his chest that he had never experienced before. For these precious minutes, he wasn't a bastard or a crow or a spy. He was simply a man dancing with a woman under a sky full of stars. And that felt like the most important thing in the world. When they finally stopped, both breathless and laughing, they found themselves standing close together, her hands on his shoulders, his arms around her waist. The night air was cold against their flushed faces, but neither seemed inclined to step away from the warmth they had created between them. "Now, do you understand?" Ygritte asked, her voice soft but intense. "This is what life could be like. Not just surviving, but truly living. Not just existing, but choosing joy whenever you can find it." Jon looked down at her upturned face, at the hope and challenge, and something deeper shining in her gray eyes. He thought about tomorrow, about the choices that waited for him in the cold light of dawn. He thought about the man he had been and the man he might become. "I'm beginning to," he said, and meant it more than he had ever meant anything in his life. The fire burned lower as the night deepened around them, but neither Jon nor Ygritte seemed inclined to add more wood to the flames. They had settled back onto the fallen log, sitting closer than before. Ygritte's shoulder pressed against his arm in a contact that felt both casual and momentous. The quiet between them wasn't empty, but full. Pregnant with possibilities, neither dared speak aloud. Ygritte had pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them as she stared into the dying embers. Jon found himself studying her profile, memorizing the curve of her nose, the way her lashes cast shadows on her cheeks in the firelight. "Tell me something true," she said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something you've never told anyone else." Jon considered the request, feeling the weight of all his untold secrets pressing against his ribs. There were so many truths he had never spoken, so many thoughts that lived only in the quiet corners of his mind. "I used to pretend," he said finally, the words coming slowly, carefully. "When I was small, I used to pretend that my mother was a princess from across the narrow sea, that she had loved my father so much she gave up her crown for him, and that someday she would come back for me." Ygritte turned to look at him, her gray eyes soft with understanding. "What happened to that dream?" "I grew up." Jon's smile was rueful. "Learned that bastards don't get fairy tale endings, that love doesn't conquer kingdoms, and mothers who abandon their children don't return wearing crowns." He paused, then added more quietly, "Though I still wonder sometimes who she was, what she looked like, if she ever thought about the son she left behind." "Maybe she did." Ygritte's voice carried a gentleness he hadn't expected. "Maybe she thinks about you every day and regrets not being brave enough to fight for what she wanted." The possibility hung in the air between them, fragile as frost, but warming nonetheless. Jon had spent so many years imagining his mother as someone who simply didn't want him, who had been content to walk away and never look back. The idea that she might have suffered too, might have carried her own regrets, was both painful and oddly comforting. Your turn, Jon said, deflecting attention from his own vulnerability. Tell me something true. Ygritte was quiet for so long that Jon began to think she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller than he had ever heard it. I'm afraid, she admitted, the words barely audible above the whisper of wind through the pines. Not of dying, not of fighting, not of any of the things that should scare a girl beyond the wall. I'm afraid of being ordinary. Jon frowned, trying to understand. Ordinary how? Of being just another wildling girl who lives and dies without leaving any mark on the world. Of having my whole life add up to nothing more than survival. She picked up a small stick and poked at the glowing coals, sending sparks spiraling up into the darkness. My grandmother used to tell stories about women who changed the course of rivers, who spoke with wolves, who loved so fiercely they made mountains weep. I want to be remembered like that. I want my life to matter. The raw honesty in her confession made Jon's chest tight. Here was someone who understood the hunger that had driven him from Winterfell, the need to be more than just another bastard son, forgotten by history. You're not ordinary, he said with quiet conviction. You're the most extraordinary person I've ever met. She looked at him then, searching his face for signs of false flattery or empty courtesy. Whatever she saw, there seemed to satisfy her, because her smile, when it came, was radiant. You don't know me well enough to say that yet. Then give me the chance to know you better. The words were out before Jon could consider their implications, hanging in the cold air like a challenge thrown down between them. Ygritte's eyes widened slightly, and he could see her weighing what he was really asking. What such knowledge would cost them both? That's a dangerous thing to want, Jon Snow. Her voice carried warning, but underneath it lay something that might have been hope. Knowing someone truly means seeing all their broken pieces, all the parts they try to hide. It means staying even when it gets hard, even when the person you thought you knew turns out to be someone else entirely. I'm not afraid of your broken pieces, Jon said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. I think they might fit perfectly with mine. Ygritte studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to memorize every detail. You really mean that, don't you? You're not just saying words because the fire's warm and the night's cold, and I'm the only company for miles. I mean it. Jon reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, he brushed a strand of copper hair back from her face, his fingers lingering against her cheek. I've never meant anything more in my life. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. Then ask me again tomorrow, when the sun's up and reality comes creeping back. Ask me when you remember who you're supposed to be, and I remember who I'm supposed to fight. If you still want to know me then, maybe we'll have something worth building on. And if I do ask, then I'll tell you about the scar on my shoulder from the first time I tried to climb the ice cliffs. I'll tell you about the song my mother sang when she braided my hair, and why I stopped letting anyone touch it after she died. I'll tell you about the boy I kissed when I was 14, and how he tasted like summer berries and broken promises. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. I'll tell you everything, Jon Snow. All of it. The good and the bad, and the parts that might make you wish you'd never asked. The promise in her words was both thrilling and terrifying. Jon had spent his entire life surrounded by people who knew exactly who he was supposed to be, who never looked deeper than the surface of bastard son, sworn brother, dutiful soldier. The idea of being truly known, completely seen, was more intimate than any physical touch. I'll ask, he said simply. Whatever tomorrow brings, I'll ask. Ygritte opened her eyes then, and Jon saw something shift in their gray depths. A decision being made, a wall coming down. Then I suppose we should make sure there is a tomorrow. She stood gracefully, moving to her pack and pulling out several thick furs. The fire won't last the night, and the cold out here can kill you while you sleep. She began arranging the furs near the dying embers, creating a nest that looked warm and inviting. We'll need to share warmth if we want to wake up breathing. Jon felt heat flood his face, despite the cold. The practical necessity of what she was suggesting warred with everything he had been taught about proper behavior, about the distance that should be maintained between unmarried men and women. But this wasn't the soft South, with its rules and chaperones. This was the wild, where survival trumped propriety every time. I won't take advantage, he said quietly, the words feeling clumsy and inadequate. I give you my word. Ygritte's laughter was soft, affectionate. Oh, Jon Snow, you really don't understand how this works, do you? She settled onto the furs, pulling one of the larger pelts up to her chin. Taking advantage would be letting you freeze to death because you're too noble to share a blanket. Taking advantage would be pretending, I don't want you close, just to preserve some idea of virtue that has no place beyond the wall. She patted the space beside her, her expression patient but expectant. Come here, Crow. Let me teach you how wildlings stay warm. Jon approached slowly, as if she might spook and disappear if he moved too quickly. The furs were softer than anything he had felt since leaving Winterfell, and when he settled beside her, the warmth that radiated from her body was more effective than any fire. She arranged the pelts around them both, creating a cocoon that shut out the cold in the world beyond. Better? She asked, though she was close enough now that he could feel her breath against his neck when she spoke. Much better, Jon managed, though his voice came out rougher than intended. This close, he could smell the scent that seemed to cling to her skin, pine and wood smoke, and something wild that made him think of summer storms. Every breath brought her deeper into his lungs until he felt drunk on her presence. Ygritte shifted slightly, turning onto her side so she could face him. In the dim light that filtered through the furs, her face was all shadows and soft curves, beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. Can I tell you another secret? She whispered. Jon nodded, not trusting his voice. I lied earlier about the dreams. Her fingers found his chest again, tracing idle patterns through his leather jerkin. I wasn't just dreaming about dancing with you. I was dreaming about this, about lying close enough to count your heartbeats, about being warm together while the world froze around us. Ygritte. Her name came out like a prayer, rough with want and wonder. I know it's mad. I know we barely know each other. Know we're supposed to be enemies. But I can't stop thinking about what it would feel like to kiss you properly. Not just in dreams, but here, now, with nothing between us but choice. Jon felt as if the ground had shifted beneath him, as if everything he thought he understood about the world had rearranged itself while he wasn't looking. This fierce, wonderful girl was offering him something he had never dared imagine, something that existed beyond duty and honor and all the careful rules that had governed his life. What if I disappoint you? He asked, the question torn from some deep place of uncertainty. What if I'm not who you think I am? Ygritte's smile was soft, understanding. Then you'll disappoint me, and I'll disappoint you right back, because that's what people do. They're human and flawed, and they make mistakes. Her hand moved to cup his face, thumb brushing across his cheekbone. But maybe, if we're very lucky, we'll disappoint each other in ways that matter less than all the ways we don't. And so they lay there, in the warmth of shared furs, in whispered promises, watching the last embers fade to glowing ash as sleep began to claim them both. Jon's arm had found its way around Ygritte's waist, and her head rested against his chest, where she could hear the steady rhythm of his heart. Tomorrow would bring choices and consequences, the harsh light of day that might shatter this fragile magic they had built between them. But tonight, in this small circle of warmth beyond the wall, they had found something worth more than duty or honor or the expectations of others. They had found each other. Let their story carry you gently into dreams of your own, where love blooms in unexpected places and the heart finds its way home against all odds.